As Brian said, my name is Steve Winnick, and I'm a folklorist at the Library of Congress. But I want to say that I've had a long relationship with the World Music Institute, so I want to thank them for inviting me to do this. I'm a New Yorker born and raised, and in the 1980s, I was a DJ on WKCR FM, which is the Columbia University radio station, and those were the first few years of the World Music Institute. And so we used to promote their concerts on air all the way back from 1986 to 1990 when I was on the air there. So I've had, as they said, a long relationship with the World Music Institute. I'm very happy to be here with everyone tonight. And I'm especially happy that my guest is Carlos Nunez. Of course, Carlos is one of the foremost players of the Galician bagpipes, the gaita, but also actually all bagpipes. He can play most varieties of bagpipe and also whistles, recorders, flutes, all kinds of instruments. He's been trained in early music as well as in traditional Celtic music. And we're going to talk to Carlos about his whole life and career, and also some of the influences that he's had over the years from traditional music and from early music. And before we do that, I think the idea was to play at least one tune that we can start out by talking about. And so we're going to hear probably the tune that most Americans would be most familiar with in Galician music. It's called Aires de Pontevedra. So let's hear that tune. So that was Aires de Pontevedra, which is probably the best known gaita tune that's out there in the Celtic music scene. And Carlos, one of the great things about Carlos is not only as such a great musician, but he's done a lot of research into the music traditions that he plays, both the medieval traditions and the traditional music traditions and the connections between them. And so he knows a lot about the history of this tune. In fact, Carlos, you wrote a book about the person from whom this tune is best known. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. How are you, Steve? Long
It is so
time.
good to see you, Carlos. Thank you.
5 years ago in Washington, last time I think we saw each other on a stage. We played together, and you was singing with us.
Yes.
Amazing traditional song from the Celtic music. Thank you so much, Gabby, Kate, Brian. The last time we were in New York, it was with the World Music Institute. That's a beautiful concert. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share this music with all of you. Thank you. So, absolutely, Steve, the history of Aires de Pontevedra is amazing. It's one of these pieces of music that you can see that traditional music is almost as a cathedral. I say often it's a cathedral. You can recognize many styles superposed. No, it's like a cathedral that you see Baroque. Then under the Baroque part, you see the medieval part.
Yeah.
Under the medieval part, maybe built in a dolmen, no, in a
Yeah.
Celtic dolmen. No? So this piece is like that. We know that many generations in Galicia played this tune, and we know how the tune was the evolution, no, of these tunes. So we know records from 100 years ago. So we can see as this piping music was mixolydian, no, it was modal music, and then in the 20th century became more like the tonality of today, like classical music, and then Celtic music push again this music because the Scottish pipers all around the world, the Breton pipers, they were playing this with Scottish pipes. So then this music became again modal with the old system. So it's unbelievable, no? That became a sort of anthem in Celtic music, and we played Aires de Pontevedra even in football stadiums in Paris with 80,000 people in the audience. Crazy.
And it also has a connection to the Galician diaspora in the New World, right? So there's a connection with Venezuela in this tune.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is what we call in Spain músicas de ida y vuelta, no? When music goes to America and then go back. Very often we speak about ida y vuelta for flamenco. No? Everyone knows that flamenco went to Cuba, went to Latin America, then changed things and came back to Spain. But the Celtic music is the same. It's true that very often people think about this kind of go and go back for Celtic music of Ireland or Scotland. Everyone knows about this history with Ireland, Scotland, and for example, the East Coast of America or the Nova Scotia, Cape Breton. But very few people knows about Venezuela or Cuban pipers or Argentinian pipers, and it's amazing. Yes, in the 20th century, a piper that I met when I was a schoolboy, Ricardo Portela. I met him when I was 12, 11 years old, and he was amazing. He used close fingering. He one piece of this guy, Ricardo Portela, could have 50, 100 notes. And from that 50, 100 notes, the 60% all ornaments.
Wow.
So Ricardo Portela, before he died, he asked me, Carlos, please transcribe my music. Transcribe this piece, Aires de Pontevedra, and any music from my repertoire that you can. It was a process of 30 years. And finally, when we were confined here in Spain, I did it. Finally, I did. And I'm very, very happy because he has a treasure, all these repertoires. You know, in piping music, is so important, not just the melody, but the ornaments that gives all this substance into the tradition.
And so just to clarify, he had gone to Venezuela in the 1950s and then returned to Spain. Is that right?
Exactly, exactly. So in Venezuela, he was in touch with all the emigrants of Galicia. So with many people in Venezuela, he put together this piece with the memory of everyone there. So once more, this is a demonstration that traditional music is never a composition from one person. It's a common creation. No? So many people creating at the same time with the memory, and it's great because Ricardo Portela he came back to Galicia, and then this tune became again very important tune. So and then in Celtic music. It was spread with Daniel Brass from Brittany, with the bagats, with the pipe bands. Every piper is a sort of ambassador of Aires de Pontevedra in the world.
That's right. You can't. It's hard to find a piping tradition where people don't now play that tune, just because it's become the tune that's iconic of Galicia, and just also a beautiful tune that people like to play. So it's really sort of central to our understanding of Galician music now. But of course, there was a wide variety of traditional music played in Galicia when you were a child, and even of course before that. So talk a little bit about the traditional music scene, the older people who played traditional music when you were growing up.
Well, I born in the last years of the Franco period. We had a dictator in Spain for 40 years, Franco, everyone knows. And at that time, piping music was not so popular. You know,
Mhm.
with the Spanish Civil War, the traditions became nearly impossible. No anymore professional pipers. So people like the famous pipers from Sotelo or even Ricardo Portela, they had to emigrate to the diaspora. So they went to Venezuela, to Argentina, to countries like Cuba. And all this music survived a lot in Latin America. So the case of Aires de Pontevedra is a very beautiful case of when after that dark period of the Franco years, then the tradition became again. So with the democracy, when I was a schoolboy in the 70s, with the democracy, Spain was like a child full of spirit. So everyone in Spain, the feeling it was like, yes, we exist. Galicia exists. The Basque country exists. Catalonia exists. So there was a sort of mission. No, all the traditional musicians. Had a little bit the mission to save the tradition. That was not a business, no. When I started to play with the chieftains years later, I discovered that this was a profession. You could have
Right.
professional tours all around the world and to play with pop stars like they did the chieftains. But when I started, I had a mission, and the mission it was to save the tradition and to come again with the level the pipers had in the 19th century. So it was very important for me, Steve, to be in touch with the pipers from Scotland, from Ireland, from Brittany. All these pipers in Celtic music, they had techniques and they had knowledge that it was lost in Galicia. We had some old recordings, vinyl recordings from the beginning of 20th century, and what we heard, even in pipers that were in Argentina, for example, in Buenos Aires, a Galician piper, fantastic, Manuel Dopazo, he played roles like the Irish pipers, and that didn't exist anymore in Galicia. So Celtic music helped a lot to us, especially Celtic festivals like Lorient Festival in Brittany. So these contacts of pipers from all the Celtic countries, it was so important. For example, the Macallan Trophy. It was a sort of uh, yeah, this kind of competitions of pipers.
Right.
The first time I saw an Asturian piper from Asturias or pipers from other parts of Spain, it was not on Spanish TV. That didn't exist on Spanish TV. On Spanish TV, you could see in the democracy just flamenco and rock and roll. I saw for the first time other Spanish pipers in the Celtic Festival of Lorient. The inter-Celtic exchanges were so important.
Great. So, but on the other hand, there were also, and you've done a lot of research here, there were also traditional musicians going back many years from when you grew up, and there were field recordings made uh, of those musicians, and you've done a lot of studies into those as well. And I'll reveal that one of the ways that I know Carlos is because I do work at the Library of Congress, and we have a major collection there, which is one of the earliest extensive field collections from Galicia, which was made by the American folklorist Alan Lomax in the early 1950s. And this is a great collection which you can hear online, and the World Music Institute will send out an email with a link to that where you can hear it. But Carlos came to us to do research on that collection and put together actually a whole concert out of that collection, which he alluded to at the beginning. And in that concert, I took part as the voice of Alan Lomax. So I was reading some excerpts from Lomax's field notes. So we have an excerpt of that too, which Gabby can play for us, and then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about Lomax's influence when we've seen that little video. All right, thank you. So that was just a little snippet, and that whole concert you'll get a link to it. It's online. So Gabby's going to send out links to all of this stuff when our presentation is over. So Carlos, talk about those Lomax recordings and how they inspired you and why you started to research them in the first place.
This is unbelievable. Well, we missed your introduction,
Yeah, yeah.
Steve. It was so beautiful because for me, the most beautiful thing about Alan Lomax are not just the recordings, but also the texts. He
Hmm.
wanted to be something like a musical Hemingway, no? The way he saw all the traditions and the way he connect things, it was unbelievable. When he arrived to Galicia, he saw immediately the Celtic connections with Ireland, with Scotland. He has beautiful descriptions, and the recordings he has from pandereteiras, the woman playing tambourines and the pipers, and always connecting with all the traditions. He had the big picture, no? Like many Americans, you have, no, this capacity of to connect and to have the big picture, not just a regional vision, but as once Paddy Maloney from the Chieftains, he told me, Carlos, don't think in your little country, think in the world, and the big thing, the big connection. No?
Well, it's interesting because, Lomax talks about the connection of Galicia to the Celtic world. And if you follow the sort of history of scholarship on that, for some time, people in the Celtic studies area weren't that enthusiastic about the idea of Galicia as Celtic because the Celtic language wasn't preserved that well anywhere in that region of Spain, and they were considering Celtic to be a linguistic determination. But recently there's been a lot of archaeological work identifying what you call the Atlantic corridor. And this kind of opens up the idea that all of these cultures were in fact connected, and that Celtic may be the wrong name for it. It might have been better to call it the Atlantic culture, but it's now being called Celtic culture. So talk about that because you've done a lot of research into those connections and the archaeological side of Celtic music or Atlantic music.
Look, Steve, if someone asked me 10 years ago, what's Celtic music? Maybe my idea it was, well, Celtic music is a beautiful musical genre, like a flamenco, like blues, like classical music, and maybe it's a imagination from the 19th century, beautiful like the flamenco, no? But look, the archaeologists, they are really leading like big teams with musicologists, with people from the linguistic side, history. So we are working all together. And it's fantastic because an archaeologist like Barry Cunliffe, he's in Oxford University, he's one of the big maestros of Celtic culture. He says that he explained to me this idea of the longue durée, no? Longue durée as a connection with the past, no? So there is always things doesn't cut like Middle Age, Renaissance, Baroque, but in tradition always there is a continuum, no? So things always move to the future, and you can see how music is adapting things all the time to still alive, but you can see elements always from the past that are always. So today we know many things from the old Celts, and when we say old Celts, it's people from 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, and it's true. In Galicia or in Spain, we don't speak any more Celtic languages, but we are still having Celtic words, even in Galician or even in the Spanish language. The word perro, for example, perro, dog, perro, is not Latin.
Right.
The experts say perro, for example, is Celtic. as many words. And today we know that in Portugal and in Spain we have the experts. They say they are the oldest Celtic texts we know at the day of today. You know, in Portugal, in Spain, texts from 2,000 years ago. From 2,000 years ago, and why we have that in Spain or in Portugal? Because we have the Romans and we have the Phoenicians that they arrived with the system of to write. No, so we have all these texts written. This is a treasure. In the same way, when the Romans they arrived to Scotland or to England, they didn't show Celts. The Romans they saw Celts in Italy, in Spain, or in France, in the Iberian Peninsula. So when people start to say, okay, Ireland is Celtic, Scotland is Celtic, well, from the 1500s, that the linguistics they said, wow, this is Celtic languages. The Welsh, the Irish, the Scottish, they are Celtic languages. So today we know many things, and we know even some instruments from the Celtic Atlantic culture from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Lyres, that the musical system from the lyre went into the harp, and from the harp through the pibroch to the bagpipes, and this is still alive today. So it's unbelievable that that Celtic tradition then moves to America, North America and South America. So you have, for example, the North Americans, they say that your major tone, so the major scale that you hear
Right.
on the radio, that you see, is not the same major scale as Mozart or Beethoven they use. You have the Mixolydian, no? You have systems with a whole subtonic. That is like in the medieval music, like in Celtic music, like in rock and roll, like in blues, you know very well. Or when you go to Doric music, you know. That is Cantigas de Santa Maria, is Celtic music, American music, and also in Latin America. So you can see all this influence from that Celtic Atlantic world that then goes to America and mix with African music, and this is fantastic, you know. I'm so happy because in the last years, the Celtic music, we have many things coming from the university, from the musicologists, from the archaeologists. So we are working all together, and come on, this is very important. It's a genre of music with thousands of years of. It's important. No?
Yeah, well, and I want to point out to everyone that if you want to hear more of what Carlos has to say about this and you read Spanish, he has a very detailed book about these connections and their connection to the modern Celtic world as well. So Carlos can really talk about his research on this topic and related topics. So we'll also provide a link on how you can get the book if you're a Spanish reader. But you mentioned the lyre and some of these archaeological finds that are relevant to musicology. And we have a little bit of video of you talking about those traditions as well, which you provided to us. So let's hear that clip. This is from a musical instrument exhibit that Carlos worked on. So let's see the clip of the lyre and the double tonic.
In the time Gabi tried to make happen this video, I can tell you that the double tonic is a system. It's amazing. It's a system how the all the Celtic music from the bards with the harps with the lyres used to work. It's a sort of contrasting chords between tension and no tension. So all the Welsh bards centuries ago, they wrote all this with zeros and ones and zeros. So the one, it was calm, zero, it was the tension. So it's a binary system, and this system is still alive in 90% of bagpipe music, in harp music. It's fantastic.
All right. Aha, here we go.
The earliest musical instrument we know in Galicia is a lyre from the Bronze Age, found in an Atlantic rock art context. There are other Atlantic lyres. There is, for instance, a statue of a bard holding a lyre and wearing a torque, found in Brittany. And there are two possible lyre bridges in the Isle of Skye. I visited the cave where one was found with my friend John Parser. Archaeologists say that lyres could have arrived to the Atlantic from the Mediterranean and then traveled north via the Atlantic corridor. But there were things that traveled from the north to the south also, like a particular type of Irish shield. Archaeologist Barry Cunliffe says that a Bronze Age warrior would feel at home in the Atlantic coast, from Iberia to the Hebrides. And in the warrior stele from the west of the peninsula, we can see both weapons and lyres. So warriors could be musicians as well, and it makes perfect sense because knowledge was preserved orally. The only place in which lyres are still played in oral tradition is Africa. They even made tutorials explaining how to make them. So our band member, Pancho Alvarez, has made a lyre with his own hands, as traditional players still do there, and is learning how to play it. He's trying different tunings, like those proposed by our friends Barnaby Brown and Peter Greenhill for early medieval lyres that we know they were also played in the peninsula.
All right. So that was that was a little bit about the lyre in early Atlantic music, you might say, but also, as Carlos was saying, this lyre had a specific notation system or a system of playing, which has then transferred to other instruments, and you can hear it today, echoes of it in bagpipe music specifically. So, so Carlos, you've worked not only in these very early music sort of concepts and ideas, but also bringing that forward. We talk about the longue durée, so there's a connection between that music and modern music, but that goes through the Middle Ages as well. And one of the projects that you were involved in that we wanted to talk about a little bit was the Portico Orchestra. So tell us a little bit about that very interesting project.
Well, Steve, everyone knows about Santiago de Compostela, the way of Santiago, the St. James pilgrimage in Galicia. When you arrive to the Cathedral of Santiago, all the pilgrims, they come through the big door and they can see the Porch of Glory, the big portico with the 24 all people there playing different musical instruments. Is imagine like a symphonic medieval orchestra with 8 fiddles, oval fiddles, with 4 fiddles in 8, with 2 rotas, sort of triangular medieval harps played by Tristan and all these legends, amazing. 2 harps, 2 psalteries, 2 lutes. Sometimes in some of the porticos, you can see them like banjos, like medieval banjos.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. You can see this orchestra like a Camino de Santiago orchestra, but you could also imagine that this is a sort of connection with medieval and the Celtic world, and also with America, because when you see, for example, the fiddles in the portico, you can see that the bridges are not like that, like the modern violin. that the bridge is to play individually every string.
Yeah.
The bridges were more like that. So you have to play with 2 or 3 strings, like in America today, the country musicians,
Yeah.
or like the Celtic fiddle players, no,
The
with the
Cajun
drum.
fiddle players too, yeah.
Exactly. So this philosophy of the drones was already in the Middle Ages with these instruments and with the big hurdy-gurdy called the organistrum,
Yeah.
big one. Is amazing. So we put for the first time all together these instruments, and the experience, it was really unbelievable. The sound of all these instruments and the way of play all this. When we did it just 2 times. The second time, we invite the Grand Maestro Jordi Sabal, the viola da gamba player Jordi Sabal, and he said to me that day, Carlos, Celtic music is also a historical music. Now we know that Celtic music is here today. We know how it was at the 19th century, but now we are starting to know how it was also in the Middle Ages.
Yeah. So we brought a little snippet of video of that Portico Orchestra playing as well. So if Gabby could show us that, that would be great. So there was the Portico Orchestra put together by Carlos with many friends and helpers, and a number of concerts that used all the 24 instruments that are depicted on that massive portico at Santiago. So I'm noticing that we have a number of questions in the question and answer box. So I'm going to ask Carlos some questions on behalf of people in our audience. One asks whether there was any repertoire from the gaita associated with Barco de Valdeorras in Galicia. Do you know about that, Carlos? Do you know an answer?
Well, Barco de Valdeorras, beautiful. In Galicia, we have so many pieces of gaita, thousands and thousands, and always each piece is associated with a place. And in every place, always there was a piper. So, of course, from the Barco de Valdeorras, there are muiñeiras, there are alboradas, and it's unbelievable. And what is amazing is that all this is still alive in tradition. In Galicia, it's not a revival. The tradition is still there.
Mm-hmm. Great. And another question, someone asks how you became interested in playing Beethoven's arrangements of Celtic music, of Scottish songs, etc.
Look, ten years ago, during a Deutsch German tour, we visit the house of Beethoven in Bonn. And then 5 years ago, we play in Vienna, in the Vienna Musikverein, and we visit also the house of Beethoven there. And I was amazed by the number of Celtic music from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, that Beethoven arranged in the last 10 or 15 years, when he was in his last 15 years. And why Beethoven did all this? It was for money? It was not for money. It was because Beethoven saw in Celtic music modality, rhythms, very interesting melodies. Beethoven, he was a genius, and as all the Germans, classical music, they master incredibly the harmony. But the melodies and all these musical systems from the Celtic music, Beethoven saw modernity in all this. So when you see all this Celtic music arranged by Beethoven, then you find backbeats like in rock and roll. You see blue notes like in American music. You see chords that you can hear in American music. So it's like in the 1800s, Beethoven putting together classical music with the harmony and the Celtic music with the modality all together. The results were like before rock and roll, before American music. He dreamt all this, and that was a big inspiration for him to make the seventh symphony. The seventh symphony is called also the Irish Symphony. All the beginning and all the end of this symphony is Irish music that Beethoven learned from all this experience. So we are putting all together this repertoire from Beethoven. I think the most difficult secret for all this music is that when the classical musicians, they try to sing and to play this Beethoven, they must follow the sense of rhythm. When you play this music with the rhythm of jig or with the rhythm of hornpipe or reel, then you understand that the piano is so fast and so difficult. I asked Jordi Sabal, Jordi, is really possible that a pianist from that time played so fast to play the jigs that Beethoven did with all this complexity? And he said to me, of course, Carlos, Beethoven, he improvised a lot. He was a virtuoso. And maybe even the way of singing that, more than operistic voices, it was more like traditional voices, no? Mm-hmm. So I think there is a whole work to make around Beethoven Celtic music. Beautiful.
All right. Well, that's a great answer and a great question. So thanks for that question. And we, there's one question here that gets to an area that we didn't get a chance to talk that much about, which is musical training. So the question is whether traditional music is something that kids now learn in school in Galicia. And I guess we could ask that going back to your days in school. How did you start to learn this music? And is it the same today or has it changed?
Look, Steve, I started to play in the school when I was 8. Every child in Galicia, in all over Spain, all over Europe, plays the recorder. Mm-hmm. It's the same in America.
Same here, yeah.
So the recorder, it was nearly the same fingering as the gaita. So the natural step for me, it was the gaita, because I was born in Galicia. If I was born in Andalusia, in the south of Spain, probably I will play the flamenco guitar as Paco de Lucia. But the natural step, it was from Galicia to play the gaita.
All right. So someone is asking to please identify the other musicians who are playing with you. I know Pancho Alvarez is the string player, and of course Xurxo, your brother, is the percussionist, but there are different fiddlers in the different concerts that we showed. So if you want to tell their names for...
Oh yes, the first video we saw, we have a Hanneke Castle. You know Hanneke, fantastic fiddle player, Irish American, unbelievable, maestra. And then we could see also, I think it was Kate, yes, Katie McNally from Boston
Hmm.
playing with us. She's also Irish. And then we saw in the Library of Congress, it was Shurshaw, I think it was Pancho
And it was
and
Stephanie.
Stephanie Kaufman from
Yeah,
Canada. Exactly.
and she was the
It's
one who danced, so that was beautiful too. Yeah.
very interesting. She was dancing with American Irish style, a Galician Muiñeira. And it's very funny because you can see the same rhythm. The Irish or the Irish Americans, they feel the same rhythm and they dance with a proper style. But if you go to Mexico, you can find the same kind of rhythm in mariachi, the same kind of steps. And it's very interesting because all this music traveled also to South America through the Christmas carols, through the villancicos. So today we see, Mexican music from mariachi, or music from Cuba, or music from Argentina, or music from Chile, or music from, and we can see that there was like a common repertoire
Yeah.
from hundreds of years ago, coming from the bagpipes and from the bagpipes Christmas carols through the fiddles and harps. Le voilà, American.
Yeah, it's not an accident that there's a Santiago de Cuba and a Santiago in Chile. That immigrants from Galicia went to all of these places. Um, so I guess there's one thing that I'm going to tell you. It's not really a question, but I want you to know that our good friend Judith Cohen is here watching us as well. And Judith wanted to tell everyone that she's working on a published version of Lomax's field diaries from Spain, and that those will be available sooner rather than later, we hope, as a published book. But Judith also took part in that concert that we showed at the Library of Congress, and she's a wonderful ethnomusicologist who is probably the I would say the world's leading expert on those Spanish recordings made by Alan Lomax, and a friend of Carlos's going back many, many years, and mine too. So it's nice to know that we've got friends in the audience as well. So I
Un
think
beso, Judith, un beso. Aquí, Judith.
So I think that may be all that we have time for here. We've answered many of the questions that came up in the Q&A, as well as the questions that I had. But I guess just if there's anything left that you want to tell us about Celtic music or your music, what you're working on now, for example, what's your next project? I think people would love to hear about that.
Well, look, in the last years, it's true that we didn't record albums because the technology is changing. Now everything is digital.
Right.
So I was working for 3 years for that book that you have.
Yeah.
I have here another copy. This book about the Celtic music and all this. Today, I think it's so important, Steve, to put together, I think, the young people, the younger generations, with the old masters. When I had the opportunity to start to tour around the world with the chieftains, for example, that was unbelievable for me. The opportunity they gave to me to come to the United States, or when I remember that experiences when the Rolling Stones arrived to Dublin and say, okay, let's record with the chieftains Rocky Road to Dublin, or Ray Cooder saying to the chieftains, yeah, let's go to Cuba to record Cuban Galician music from the emigrants. Or then the chieftains, they say, oh, Carlos, let's go to Mexico and explore that connections with Celtic and Mexican. The chieftains, they opened the doors of paradise for me.
Yeah.
So for me now, I think it's very important to help also young people. I think there is so much talent in many countries around the world. And if we connect, and Steve, at the end, I think Celtic music is about connections. I think that's the spirit of Celtic music. Is what we call in Galicia and in Spain la irmandade, hermandad, brotherhood. No,
Yeah.
this capacity of connect traditions and to feel like a big family.
Well, I'll say that Hermandad is an important part of your first, popular album and your book. Both of them have that in the title. So we know that your approach to Celtic music is always that there's a global family, and that the Celts are, one set of cousins, maybe one branch of that family.
Well, Steve, every time we come to the United States, I can hear expression like, oh, wow, guys, you pull everyone together. Latin musicians, African musicians, Irish, Celtic, all together. How is that possible? And I say, well, I don't know. I come from Spain. Spain is between Europe, Africa, America. So maybe our tradition is like that. It's a mixture, no?
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, I guess partly also Latin music has so much African music in it, and yet it's expressed in Spanish. And so you have a linguistic connection with that, as well as the deep cultural connection. So wonderful to have Carlos here. So once again, I want to thank Carlos Nunez. I want to thank the World Music Institute, Gabby and Brian, for all their work on this, and just reiterate what a wonderful experience this was to have Carlos Nunez and his music, and to let everybody know that you will also receive links to all of these videos that we have presented, so that you can actually see the full videos rather than just the clips that we selected. We just wanted there to be some music, not just us talking, so that's why we had the clips. But you can see those whole videos. All of those concerts will be coming to you in an email from the World Music Institute. So thanks once again, Steve Winnick, Carlos Nunez. We love you all. Thank you.